If you don't know the band Krungbin, you should look them up. That's Krungbin, the third room. It's so great to see everybody. If you're not on mute, can you just mute? We have quite a few people that are planning to come in today. And so I just want to make sure that you guys get what you came here for. So you found us. This isn't the third room. This is the workshop for navigating difficult conversations and finding some strategies that might help. And that's why you're here today during your lunchtime. So thank you. I'm Christine. It's great to meet you. If you can just in the chat, everybody should have the option to do so. Just put, why did you come here today? If you're comfortable sharing that. I mean, if it's like a big deal, you can make something up. But put in here what you hope to get today, or why are you here, or what made you go, man, oh man, I would like to learn, practice, and strategize some conversations. And we have about 40 women that's RSVP'd, which means, I don't know, we'll get probably 10 to 15, maybe 20. RSVPs usually work that way unless you add some type of monetary thing. But I made sure that some of these workshops that I do, these virtual ones, I really want to make accessible. So one, we can become community together through the meetup group that you joined, and then also really just kind of share ideas and be a leader in that, and share the things that I know how to do and I spent a lot of time doing. So as I mentioned, I'm Christine, and I've spent about 20 years in teenagers. I spent about 20 years in leadership, and then the last 10 really in leadership coaching, executive coaching, and looking at the unique challenges that we as women face, both in the workplace and in our personal lives. And so my PhD work has been focused on what I call creating radical care in the workplace, which I think the pandemic and the COVID-19 challenges that we've all faced really kind of brought those to light, that we need more care in the workplace, and we're starting to see some of those shifts. I would like to say I was ahead of the curve, but there are many, many people before me as well that knew that was really important. But I do my part to try to create spaces for people to thrive and for people to have the want to come to work every day, or the want to be home, or the want to build meaningful relationships with people that you care about. So I'm going to jump in because I know this is the lunch hour, and I'm going to try to give you as much value in the hour as possible. I'm a big believer that strategies and practical tools to take home are super important for whatever amount of time you spend in your learning space. So let's go ahead and jump in. So you're here because we want to navigate some difficult conversations. So I'm going to share my screen, and let me just double check and see. Stressful conversations, teenagers, different types of conversations. Oh man, the steamroller, I hear you. The internal groan that we have when we know we have to see somebody or we have to call somebody. So have that person in your mind today. Have the person in your mind that you're like, oh man, that internal groan is coming, or if I see them on the street, I'm going to go the other direction, or I'm going to hide behind my car so I don't have to see them. I've done all of those things, by the way. So if you would like, if you're one of the verbalizers like I am, so there's lots of different learning styles. I have a background in education, both elementary, middle, and high school, so I understand those teenage dramas, but also in higher education. I was the director of a master's program in management and leadership for 3.5 years at Western Governors University. So I'm a verbalizer. I love to bring the articulation to the things that are inside of our heads and our hearts. And so I tend to say the things that people don't always say, and I tend to be the vulnerable person in the room. So if you are a verbalizer and you'd like to just share anything, you can either do the raise hand here down at the bottom, right? There's like the little hand, or just come on camera, come off mute, and just let us know anything while I get the screen set up. Is there anything that anybody wants to share before I jump in? All right, here we go. Go into my tab. This is it. Let me know when you can see my screen. You guys can all see that? You can just put like a thumbs up or a okay, yes in the chat so I know we're good to go. Thank you. All right, so first and foremost, this is who I am. Like I said, I really focused on this last year, really focusing on the challenges that we as women face, and that I've just always had this real passion to bring women together in meaningful ways and just contribute in whatever way I can. So this is how you find me. If you would like to have this recording sent to you, or sent to a friend or your husband or your best friend that you're fighting with or whatever it is, if you want to be able to see this later, can you make sure to put your email in the chat? Or I also have an email link if you don't want to give everyone your email. Not that anyone here is really going to take it, but I'm going to put this link in the chat, and then it'll get you on my list, and then I'll be able to send it to you. All right, we have a lot of people jumping in now, so great. Okay, so that being said, that's how you find me. And then I'll send you the recording after today. All right, so here's the 3-point conversation presentation. So I started calling this my party trick because it works. It works really, really well. So if you don't have a pen or a piece of paper, get one now, because what you find is that when you write it down, you'll understand it better. And I need you to do a little drawing too for the 3-point conversation. And then you can put notes in there and stuff like that. So it's really helpful just to have, like a little piece of paper and a pen to get this going. So first and foremost, I say this all the time when conflict or conflict mediation or resolution is needed, or in general, just any conversation. Everyone wants to feel loved, validated, and heard. And that's usually 80% of the battle. So if you can help somebody feel cared for, feel validated in their feelings, and then you are hearing them, you don't have to agree, but you just have to say, I care about you, I understand you, I hear you. So keep that in mind. Everyone, every single human being, from a baby to your great-great-grandmother, everyone wants to feel loved, validated, and heard. That's the first part. Oh, I have to flip over here. All right, the second part you need to keep in mind before we jump into the actual strategy is that we actually have 3 ways in which our brain and heart work together. So you have the rational, logical brain, and then you have the emotional heart brain. And typically when you were thinking of that person that I asked you to think about, of why you're here today, you're immediately in that emotional brain. And that emotional brain will not make rational decisions, will not say things always super rationally. So you need to figure out how to create the wise brain. And the wise brain says, I can feel my feelings, I can logically rationalize them, and I can make decisions and actions when I know those 2 things have occurred. So I can be emotional, I can be upset, I can feel my feels, but I'm not going to take action in that time. I'm going to wait until I can really get into my logical brain and make some decisions. So the other piece of that is to recognize when somebody else is in their emotional brain, they are not going to be able to make rational decisions. So as a person who's trying to create a resolution in a hard conversation, you need to help someone get from their emotional brain into their rational brain before you can even go into any of this strategy. So when you think about that person, and you might have triggers, right? Like I have a bunch of triggers, like bring my mom into the room and I'm like really regulating, right? So like when you have these triggers, when you have these emotional responses, what I always say is you need to breathe in that discomfort and recognize where in your body you're holding it. Is it like wringing your hands? Is it that internal groan? Is it like the scrunched face and shoulders? Is it like the gotta go and run? Where in your body are you holding that discomfort? And then name it, breathe it in. I'm super uncomfortable. And then you're gonna communicate out your needs. And that's where we get to strategy. But as soon as you breathe it in and you name it and you identify it, you realize that you have a little bit more control over regulating yourself than you first realized. And same with the other person, that you can breathe it in and then get ready, right? So you're going to identify a moment in conflict. And now we all as human beings are not evolved enough to like avoid, we're not evolved enough to just face conflict head on, we still are in the fight or flight mode, right? So someday humans will evolve to be able to do this a little bit better, but to understand that we are always looking for threat. We are always looking for things not being okay, not being copacetic, because we're looking to make sure we have safety in our surroundings. And so when you're thinking about why you're here today, or why you want to learn some new strategies, or how this relates to your life so far, think about a specific moment or a specific person and really tap into, like, what are my feelings? What are my thoughts? What are my typical reactions? And what am I saying on the inside? What's my internal talk? You're going to breathe all that in. And on a piece of paper that I told you to get, I want you to write down what your needs are. So breathe in the discomfort of that specific moment and write down, what would you need in that moment? Just write it down. There's no right or wrong answer. Any thoughts or questions, or what questions or thoughts might you have about this part so far? Is everybody with me? Put a no in the, yes, you're with me. Okay, everybody with me? Any questions? Cool, thanks guys. Okay, so now you're ready. Here's the 3-point conversation. The 3-point conversation is a triangle. So draw your triangle. Internal talk. Thanks, Harmony, for asking the question. So internal talk is like what you're actually hearing in your mind. Here's a fun fact for you. On average, when you are in the world, you are thinking about 500 words per minute. Let that sink in for a minute. Every person you know, including yourself, on average, are thinking 500 words a minute. Right now, I just wondered if my dogs are okay in the back room. Totally random, just came up. I had a text message from a friend a couple minutes ago that I want to chat back with when I leave here, so I don't want to forget, and I was thinking about that. 500 words per minute are in our minds. So that means when you're in a situation, what are the internal talk pieces that are going on? Are you actively in the conversation? Are you starting to head way more into that emotional brain than you need to be able to have this conversation? So your internal talk is, what are you actually saying to yourself? Like, oh my God, I don't want her to see me right now. I can't do this conversation today. That's internal talk. Or, you know what? I freaking told him 10 times to do the dishes and the dishes are still in the sink. That's your internal talk. How is your internal talk? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it angry? Is it hurt? Is it scared? So recognizing what you're inside your brain saying. So the 3-point conversation helps us get from that emotional space into our logical, rational resolution space, okay? So the first step is to not just identify what the problem is, but agree with the other person what the problem is. So on average, here's another fun fact for you. On average, if you expect something from somebody, you make an expectation. I expect you to show up at 9 a.m. every day. 80% of the time, you will be disappointed. But if you make an agreement, hey, we need someone here at 9 a.m. every day. Are you able to do that? Is that something that you're able to do? Tell me how you're going to do that. You are 8 times more likely to follow through on an agreement. So 80% likely to fail or disappoint in an expectation, but you're 8 times more likely to follow through in accountability on an agreement. So the first step is identifying what the problem is. And in that identification is, you might not even be having the same conversation, right? Like, have you ever done this where, like, you're arguing about the dishes, but she's arguing about how you don't care about her, or how you never take into consideration what her needs are? Like, we need to be having the same conversation. So the first step is to identify, what are we talking about? What is the problem that needs to be resolved? And then we have to agree on it. So think about the problem. Somebody want to throw one out that has an example? I can always use the late to work one, but it's a really simple one. Does anyone have a problem that's in your mind that you don't mind sharing? Either come off mute and share, or you can post it in the chat.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Hi, Trisha.
Hi. I think a recent conflict I faced was me and a friend were sharing a room together, and it was about the AC. So I wanted it like on 70 degrees, and she wanted it on like 67, which is a little too cold. But yeah, I think that's the problem I had. Like I just wasn't able to solve it, or it wasn't getting solved.
Yeah. I had a roommate once where we got into like a screaming match after months of having like the passive aggressive argument over the AC. And it was gnarly. And I still didn't win. Nobody won. Right? So I understand that one. So the first thing to recognize though is the problem wasn't whether the AC was at 70 or 67, right? The problem is comfort. So it's like agreeing on what the problem is in the room.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then having you guys agree on it. Like, can we recognize I'm not comfortable? That is a problem. I'm not comfortable. Do you agree that's a problem? And like for my husband, he knows, like, I'll make it your problem if you don't agree. Just kidding. Just kidding. But right, but it's true. Like we get staunchly in our corners about what the problem is and then we can't have the same conversation. So if I go back to like the dishes example, I hate doing the dishes. And so when I ask somebody like my husband to do the dishes and he doesn't do them, I feel like it's a personal affront on like, you must not care about me because you know I hate doing them and I did all these other things. And we're not having the same conversation. So I'm going to give you a really quick example of how you run through this so we can just see it in action. So let's do the example of like showing up late to work. It's a problem, right? So the problem is we have to be at work at 9 a.m. and Jane isn't showing up on time. The next step for me is I have to collect evidence on the problem, right? So Trisha, for you, the evidence is going to be really specific. And for the dishes, it's really specific. The dishes are still in the sink. I asked you to do the dishes. The dishes are not done. For Jane, it's you are supposed to be here at 9 o'clock. I have looked at your time card over the last 20 days, and out of those 20 days, 16 of those days you have been late. Here's some evidence of impact. Here's some evidence that, when you were supposed to show up at 9 and a client was here at 9, that client had to wait 16 minutes before you arrived on Tuesday, June 11th. It's very specific. You want data points as much as you possibly can. Again, remember, we're moving from emotional space to logic space. So saying, well, I feel like you don't care about me when you don't do the dishes and you say you're going to do the dishes is not logical. It's emotional. So what I need to do is say the dishes are still in the sink. Last night you said you were going to do the dishes. The dishes are still there. End. Hard stop. Right? Evidence. And we have to be really careful on what we call evidence. Evidence is data. It's factual. It's proven. We're trying to get into our logical brain. The next step from there is to look at possible solutions. Now, possible solutions are tricky because you can't really get there yet until the person that you are chatting with first agrees on what the problem is. It is a problem that I haven't been here at 9. You're right. I'm seeing that now because of the evidence. You have to work in those two areas until you agree there is a problem. We agree on what the problem is, and here's some evidence that's just not negotiable. Once we agree that there's evidence to support the problem, then we can come to the table with possible solutions. For me, if I'm driving the conversation, I've already mapped this out on my piece of paper, right? Like I've already mapped it out. I've already identified what I think the problem is. I've identified all the pieces of evidence I need to gather so that I can also share them if I need to. And then I also make myself remember that I ask for evidence, right? There's a whole asking process in this, right? Then I can move over to solutions and say, Jane, now that we both understand that like that 9 o'clock time is so critical. And she'll say, well, Christine, I have to take my kid to the daycare and the daycare doesn't open until 9:30. So I've been dropping her off there early at 9:15 just so I could get here as quick as I can. Go back to being loved, validated, and heard. Jane, I know that sounds like a really tough problem. Like I hear you. And I'm sure like in the morning, you must be really, really stressed out because you're already late. And now you're dropping your daughter off without giving a proper goodbye. That must be tough. The problem is though, you got to be here at 9. And here's the evidence of why that's important. Well, Christine, we never said 9 o'clock. When you first started your job and you signed that job agreement, it was on there. If we need to talk about scheduling, we can talk about scheduling, but I need you to understand that 9 o'clock time is really important. Once Jane understands that 9 o'clock time is really important, agrees that the evidence is there, we can come up with possible solutions together. Meaning, I'm open to her solutions as well. Maybe it's that maybe she can't change her daycare time. Maybe that's just a fact for her. She can't change her daycare time. What can we do to create a solution so the 9 o'clock time works? Or maybe that client moves to a 10 o'clock hour. We start brainstorming ideas together. Yeah, Trisha, go for it.
So my next question is, once we have our problem, our evidence, the solution doesn't go well, how do you manage the emotions of not, I guess, getting what you want or reaching a solution?
I mean, you have to remember that when you're doing this 3-point conversation, it's on like really clear spaces, right? So like maybe what you find with your friend with the AC is that you're not going to come to an agreement on a solution. But maybe you can come to agreement on care, right? So you might come to agreement of like, all right, so if we put it at 67, then I get an extra blanket, or like we put it to 70 until 8 o'clock, and then maybe at at that time we can move it down to 67 because I'm in the blankets, or like the other person has to be like, they're going to try to detract you. And that's the thing, is like difficult conversations are difficult because people are going to just be oscillating between emotional and logical, and they're going to try to detract you from this. And that's where I implement the pause. How do you keep the other person from feeling attacked by all the evidence? Anju, you can't like lay it out on the table, right? And this is where that questioning comes into play. So let me see if I put it in here. No. So so I'm going to walk you through, and you're going to have a little bit of practice time because I want you to think about this, right? When you're in a 3-point conversation, it's specifically to come to a resolution, a solution. So we have to go back into what the problem is if we feel like it's not going well. So asking questions, Anju, is the key to not feeling attacked by evidence. So, hey Jane, I wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about showing up at the 9 o'clock hour that we agreed to back in September. Do you have time at 12 o'clock to chat today? You're not blindsiding anybody, right? You're offering the invitation in. Now, obviously, there's a bazillion more strategies we can go into if that doesn't go well, and maybe I'll do that in my next one. But what you're trying to do is get the person to come to the table, sit down, and say, hey, I've noticed that you haven't been showing up to work on time. Pause. Give them time to either affirm or deny. I've been here. Okay, well, here's the thing. I pulled the time cards from the last 20 days, and I've noticed that out of the 20, 16 of those you've been late. Pause. They have to own and be accountable for their actions, right? So similar to like my husband not doing the dishes. Hey, Josh, I noticed that the dishes are still in the sink from last night. Pause. I thought you had said you were going to do those last night. Yeah, but my favorite show was on, and then the dogs, and okay, well, here's the deal though. The dishes are still in the sink. Well, I don't want to do them right now, Christine. You always tell me when you want them done. I'll do them when I can. Right. So when the dishes are in the sink, I have a really hard time making coffee, prepping lunch. Well, I'll get to them. Okay. Right. So you said you were going to do the dishes last night and they're still there, and now I'm not able to do certain things and they're waiting. So you just go back and forth until the person diffuses, right? So you're asking them to diffuse. You're not asking them to get to solution right away, because you can't get to solutions until the person comes out of that emotional space and into the rational logical space. So that pause and asking questions is really important. Hey Jane, yesterday, did you come into work on time? Well, I was, just a few minutes late. Ah, how many minutes? So you can also ask the other person to provide evidence. It helps build that accountability. And you're trying to make agreements. Hey Josh, do you agree that the dishes in the sink are a problem for me now? Right? Eileen, if they do not get to the logical, rational state, this is not the day for that conversation with that person. You thank them for their time, and you say that you'll have to revisit when we can come back to the 3-point conversation. I've shut conversations down with employees before when it's like so heightened that I can't bring them back around, right? I can't get them into that logical space. And I'll say, Erica, I've really appreciated your time today. And I know this is a really big deal. I know this is tough. Right? You go back to love, validated, and heard all the way back. I know this is really tough. I care about you and I want to figure out solutions with you. Can we revisit this tomorrow, 10 a.m.? So that urgency and that stress should be like, you should be coming out of that, right? And that's why I was saying, when you breathe in the discomfort of the conversation, it doesn't have to end right now. But what you're going to do is just stick to this structure. Because if you come outside this structure, you're not going to get to that logical space of solutions. You're going to keep going over here and over there and talking about this and talking about that, feeling uncomfortable. P. Thomas, I'm sorry, I don't know your first name. Go for it.
Pamela. Sorry, I was trying to change
Pam. I thought it was Pam.
Yeah, thank you. Number one, to keep on track with what you just explained, it sounds like you also need to respect the other person, that they're not processing what you're saying at the same rate or in a way that they want to work something out in that manner right now. They could have a bazillion landslides on their mind. So I love your point about readdressing it at a later time. That also gives them grace, which I'm trying to practice. Like, grace is giving a way out. Right. I read that and I just thought that was a beautiful phrase. Grace is giving a way out, but also not being swept under the rug.
Right.
Yeah. And my issue often is, I get the steamroller talking over me and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. I really would like to finish my sentence. So I've said that, and it just makes them mad that, okay, they'll let me, fine.
Hey, can anyone think about how to help Pam with the steamroller? What is a different way to address the problem in a way that actually addresses the problem? It's not that Pam wants to finish her sentence.
Superior, I feel like I need to let them talk themselves all the way out. Just like, let it out, So, I do that too. But then the other issue is I've had two situations where, at different jobs, where the superior is trying to cover their ass, CYA. So they go, oh, well, I told Pam. Oh, well, I told her about this. And you're like, down the hallway in the supply room or something. You're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. She's telling the supervisor a flat out lie. How do you address that with your superior when you don't know what they're going to do next, like withhold information, punish you?
Yeah, retaliation in the workplace is real. I've been in 3 HR investigations and lawsuits as a victim in my career, and it's stressful and it's drawn out and it's scary. And I've been involved in other HR, concerns. So I totally get that. The key piece here, guys, is that if it's like a heated situation, you're not going to get the person into logic, right? You have to be able to come back and say, like, in the moment of him steamrolling, you're not going to be like, listen, John, can we just not do this anymore, right? Like you're going to have to go to him and be like, knock, knock. Hey, John, I was hoping that maybe we could talk sometime this week just about the conversation we had on Tuesday. Is there some time that we could do that? Because then you're coming in with preparation, right? And what you're going to do for evidence with, I don't know the guy's name, I'm just going to call him John. What you're going to do with evidence for John is to say, hey, John, when we were talking on Tuesday in that group at lunch, did you notice that, I tried to talk a few times and I wasn't able to. Did you notice that? And he'll go, no. And you'll say, yeah, there were 4 times in particular that I tried to speak. And what I realized is I couldn't because you were talking quite a bit in that conversation. And there were 6 of us there. If there were 6 of us there, do you remember how many people spoke during that time? Oh, yeah, it was just you. Yeah, It was just you. Yeah. And then I he's like, if it's a superior, you got to be careful. But sometimes, like what I have said before is, sometimes when we're so busy talking, we don't remember to listen. And, I heard this really awesome idea from Janelle, after that meeting, and it was a real bummer that she didn't get to say it. Evidence. The process is this, right? So what you're doing is you're gonna, and I do this a lot, like if I'm gonna have like the conversation with my boss, and I've ran circles around a boss at WGU for years because he was just so frustrating. And I would use the 3-point conversation on him every single day. And I'd sometimes plan them out. This is the process. So you're first going to recognize how the other person is feeling, even though you may not like them or you may think that it's irritating or whatever you're going to recognize the care, right? John learned how to steamroll for some reason. More than likely, it's because he was cut off. Like, I steamroll and cut people's sentences off at the end. I don't let you finish your sentence. I know this about myself because as a leader, you're constantly looking at your own flaws. So I cut people off at the last sentence because in my family, if you don't, you won't get into the conversation. So you got to listen to the majority of what they're saying and then just jump in. It's rude. And I know that. But I learned it. And it's so hard to unlearn. So the first step is to recognize, like, care, right? Then I list out I list out my problem. My problem is John's a steamroller. But that's not John's problem. That's mine, right? So how can we identify what the problem is together? To me, the problem is John's not getting the opportunity to actually hear from his colleagues and his subordinates. That's a real bummer. He's so busy talking, he's not listening. If we can agree that that happened in that conversation through some pieces of evidence from a specific conversation in a diffused situation, right? It's not in the moment. Then I can say, hey, John, the next time, hey, you know what? Next week is staff meeting. Do you mind if I just have a couple minutes to talk about an idea I had? Here's my idea. Maybe he says, no, the agenda's packed. Okay, well, maybe the next time that we chat, do you mind just taking a small moment to ask me what my thoughts are before we end the conversation? And maybe that means we have to time manage a little bit. Maybe I time clock you. Hey, there's 6 minutes left of this meeting. Can I have a minute? But we make an agreement on how to take care of me. You're my boss. You're supposed to take care of me. Some bosses have a hard time remembering that sometimes, but it's true. So that's why this is a really helpful thing to write down, because you're going to do this ahead of time. You're going to identify the problem. And the problem isn't that I want the AC at 70. The problem isn't the dishes in the sink. I mean, it is, right? But you have to recognize, what would the problem be together based on the evidence I'm seeing? And you're going to list it all out. Any possible options, so that you come prepared. And that's the thing about the evidence. Somebody had asked about evidence, like, how do you feel not attacked? You don't just lay all the evidence on the table, right? Lawyers don't do that either, right? They like span it out. So you want to make sure that you're asking questions and agreeing on pieces of evidence one at a time, because you might only need one piece of evidence. Hey, Jane, you're supposed to be here at 9 o'clock, right? Yeah, I'm so sorry. This last month has been crazy. She might come to the table for you, right? What do you guys think? There it is. It's not easy to do well the first time. You're going to feel clunky. It's going to feel like awkward. And look, I use this all the time, and I still mess it up. I still get into my emotional space and get angry or upset or hurt or avoid or whatever. But this gives you some like grounding space to recognize, like, one, if we're not having a 3-point conversation, we probably won't come to a solution, right? It's just not going to happen. And two, I gave this advice to somebody a couple of days ago. If you can breathe in the discomfort and communicate out your needs in this way, then you know it's not an emergency. It's not life or death. Like this, like I was talking to someone the other day. I was like, listen, like you work in a position where sometimes things are an emergency because of safety. And so if it is an emergency because of safety, we're not negotiating shit, right? Excuse me. We're not negotiating anything. It's safety, right? It's protocol, processes, procedures. That's why we have those. If it's not a safety issue, it's not an emergency. Okay? And like that's so hard for our bodies to recognize. That's why you got to breathe in the discomfort and recognize this is not an emergency, and we don't have to fix it in the first 3-point conversation. We have some time. Coaching on average to change behaviors, like in behavioral science, like to work on behavior change towards positivity in the workplace, typically takes 8 to 16 weeks for any kind of good change to stick. That's like basics on behavior. So like with John, you might go, hey, John, we've come up to a solution. I get to talk in the staff meeting next week for 2 whole minutes. Thanks. And then he totally spaces on giving you those 2 minutes. You're going to go straight back into that emotional space of John doesn't give a rat's butt about me. And you're going to go into the whole steamroller feeling. You're going to go back into that emotional space. Let yourself do it. Breathe it in. And then figure out what to do next. Right? Trisha, that's an understatement of the year. Conflict is hard. It's so hard. But, you know, one of the things that I've done over the last 10 years is I always say I'm the one that will run into the burning building when everybody else is running out. Toxicity is my jam, and it's because I care. I care so much that I try to go into really toxic environments and help people do better. Specifically leaders, right? Help them do better because we have a responsibility to do better and create the space for you to want to come to work every day. Similarly, like if you sit in your car for 10 minutes listening to your favorite song because you're just dreading going upstairs and into your house or whatever it is, it means that you're avoiding it because you're just feeling that fight or flight, right? Like conflict it's everywhere. And what we end up doing is we start avoiding it so much that we start building like barriers between people we actually really, really care about and that we really love and that we could have good relationships with, right? It gets so awkward because we still haven't come to solution that now we're just putting up barriers for protection. We're like doing these internal family systems of like protect that just don't serve us. And so that's the other piece for me is I'm really passionate about helping people not do that. Don't break a relationship because you can't come to an agreement over an AC setting. We can figure it out, and like we can figure it out with kindness and care, and without being sacrificed in the process.
Yeah, Yeah, I must be doing something terribly wrong because I find myself steamrolled a little bit there. Um, Even when being given instructions one time, it was a human resources person. I wasn't able to even interject. Can I repeat to you what you just said so that you're comfortable that I'm understanding you? Because it sounds like you're repeating yourself. I mean, even to say that with instructions, she was like, oh my God, she doesn't get it. What do I have to do to break through to her? And I was just like, I'm listening because she just won't shut up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
It seems like, are you like a really nice person? Like,
Pam seems like a really nice person, right? Yeah. She just gives the vibe.
You gotta roll over them, Pam.
Old Yeller. I'm just like, God, get it out. I don't know what's going on with you, but you just really want to talk today, for this one person in particular. And, it's the person that's got to maintain that they're in charge to feel good, the controller.
Well, and there are some people that, like, there are some times when, like, I've said this in a meeting, and this is kind of a unique problem sometimes as a woman in a male-dominated industry, is, like, to try to get a word in edgewise is sometimes really hard. And I one of the things, like, it depends on the person, right? Like, this is where emotional intelligence comes in and communication strategies and understanding people's behaviors. And we can do that maybe on the next one. Like, you guys are giving me so many great ideas to start sharing more. But, like, with a very dominant personality person, just asking them, are we having a conversation or is this a dialogue? Or a monologue, I'm sorry. Are we having a conversation here? Or is this a monologue? Which is also like, this could be an email, right? Like, if you're just going to talk at me, this could be an email. I got to go. So, I mean, it's like what Trisha was saying, like, maybe just like finding the things you can say to specific people to assert yourself to get to a 3-point conversation. Because you're not having a 3-point conversation if someone's just talking. And you don't have any ownership of the conversation if somebody's just talking. So really the piece here that's important when somebody's just talking is, how do you create conversation space where there's equitable investment in talking about the same thing?
I have used that. Oh, I just had a question. Are we talking about something else now?
But see, that's validating moving in that other direction, right? We got to always stick to what we're supposed to be talking about. Right? And that's the key of the 3-point conversation, is you can distract yourself too, to your point, Pam. Oh, we're talking about the weather now? Conversation's over.
I will, bring it round robin and say, because I didn't have a question about that.
Yeah. Well, I know we have about 15 minutes. Is there anyone that, I'm not a role player, so I was like, oh man, we could do breakout sessions and try to do role play, but I'm like, I don't know if we want to do that. But what would be kind of cool is if a few of you want to try to use this in a specific situation, then we can also like learn and give some feedback too, if there's any of that. So is there any brave souls that might want to like jump up and be like Steamroller Joe or Problem Child Jane or any of the mean husband who doesn't care about his wife and never does the dishes, or like anybody want to jump in and like with your conflict, maybe we can try it out?
Oh, I can be Jane. I had lots of practice with the roommates being Jane. When I was in college, I know exactly the dialogue.
Yeah. Does anyone want to try to do the 3-point conversation? So Pam is going to be our what is it called? The antagonizer, if you will. And so we need someone who can be a resolutionist, someone who can be the problem solver with the 3-point.
I can give it a shot if no one else volunteers.
Yeah. We might have enough time for more than one round. So yeah, if anybody else wants to go, we can do round 2. All right, Trisha, let's do it.
Do I come up with this situation, or does Pam?
You do, because you're the one that's going to run us through this 3-point conversation. So you're going to go up to Pam. Pam's name is now Jane, but you can call her Pam. It's fine, whatever one.
All right.
You're going to go up to Pam and explain that there's a problem.
Hi, Pam. I noticed that in our kitchen, you are moving my paper towels around. Do you mind
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
we keep things separated?
Yeah. Just a sec. Yeah. Okay. Paper towels.
Yes.
What?
So I purchased my own paper towels just so we won't be touching each other's
Oh,
items.
cool. You bought those? That is so nice of you.
Yes, I want to
we
reiterate
really
that I purchased
appreciate that,
those for
Trisha.
me. If you can keep your hands off of my personal
Why'd you
items.
put them in the kitchen if you don't want anybody to use them? I mean, anything in the kitchen is for everybody, Trisha. Everybody knows that. I'm not the only one using. What I don't want your paper towels.
Okay. Are you done, Pam?
Well, no. I mean, I don't know why you're telling me this. When have I used? Tell me when you saw me use your paper towels, Trisha.
Okay, just like I
Precious
stated
paper
earlier,
towels.
Pam,
Can I
I'm
give
gonna
you
move
mine?
you off
Hold.
right now.
Trisha, is this escalating or de-escalating?
I don't know. It's escalating. I'm getting angry.
Right? So then it's no longer a 3-point conversation because you're in that emotional space.
You're right.
Yeah. You got to come back to the problem, right? So, like,
Okay.
once it escalates to that point, like, your emotional state's not going to let you help de-escalate her into your space. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, it does.
It's so
I'm
easy
sorry,
to get
Trisha.
distracted, you guys. It's so easy. Pam, you're just amazing at this jerk face
It's
office
really
lady.
easy to get distracted, and I'm so sorry, Trisha, because I worked with jerks.
Yes. Okay.
So Trisha, when you state the problem, remember evidence, right? So like she's distracted, she doesn't care about talking to you. So remember, like she's like, what paper towels? So you're gonna make sure that she gives you the space. So you got to invite her into the problem. Hey Pam, do you have a few minutes to talk? Because I noticed that there's some paper towels in the break room that keep getting moved. You're inviting her in, because if she's not ready to come in, you're not having the same conversation. Does that make sense?
Or could Trisha be a little more blunt and say, Pam, hey, how's it going? Do you got a couple minutes? Did you use my paper towels the other day?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't care if her paper towels were moved.
That's a great
Oh,
point,
my
right?
God.
Is like, what is the problem? Is the problem that they were used or they moved or whatever? Like, I mean,
See, and that's the issue I run into. It's like I clarify, hey, I noticed my paper towels were moved earlier on in the conversation. So the issue is that they were moved.
but
They're
she's
not
not
in the
agreeing
place
that
that
that's
I
an
agreed
issue.
to.
That's the initial problem, is that she doesn't agree that moving the paper towels is a problem. So you went straight to evidence before you got her to agree there's a problem.
Oh, I
Oh,
see.
that
Okay.
teaches me too. That
Okay.
really helps me a lot.
Don't go to
I'm
evidence
just
until you make that
mimicking.
agreement.
Because, Trisha, I'm so hard on you, and please, dear, it's mostly because I have worked with some real pieces of iron steel there, and I'm just like,
So do you see that's why the 3-point conversation is so effective? Because you can't move to the next step until the first one is accomplished. So you might not get off of the problem today, but don't move to evidence until she agrees that you are on the same problem together. Does Pam care that you don't want your paper towels moved?
Probably not.
So how do we get Pam to care? Like, how does she know it's a problem? Right? And she might not. Like, she might go, I don't really care if your paper towels are moved or not.
I think a sane person would know it's a problem if it's being brought up.
Oh, but you're talking from the logical brain now, Trisha. Eileen, your hand is raised. You can't talk logic when you're in emotions. Pam doesn't give a shit. That's her emotions.
Well, that's it's funny, I'm thinking about more recently the difficult conversations I've had, and so it's funny, like you read about this stuff, but it's very different when I'm enjoying this session very much. So thank you.
It's low risk today, right?
It's yeah. So the whole that somebody has to agree to a problem, and I was just thinking like, well, how if they don't agree. So the scenario I had was a staff person who just constantly making mistakes, constantly and going through sitting down, doing one-on-ones, multiple writing out steps for them, going to multiple trainings, having them train with other people, just trying to cover every possible learning style, the visual, like I had a chart, I had a checklist, I had step by step, walking them through. And the times that I sat down with him to discuss the problem, the ongoing problem, he would, and I'm thinking about it, he would never acknowledge that it was a problem, other than he would just complain about how difficult it was to learn everything, and it takes a long time to learn all this stuff, and kind of he shouldn't be expected to know it. And so then I feel like I'd have to go into the evidence. Oh, and he didn't get proper training, and no one told him, and say, well, okay, that's not actually correct, because we sat down here, we sat down at this point, I reviewed it here, sat down with this person, you attended this training, I created a checklist, and I was like, at that point, when you have somebody who won't
and there are some people that are so pro at like not taking accountability, right? I always say I can coach you in or I can coach you out. I don't fire people. I can coach you in or I can coach you out. It's totally up to you, right? And what happens a lot of times is we think we're having the same conversation and we're not. Because Eileen, for you, the conversation is you're not efficient, you're not effective, and you're not accountable. And for him, it's you guys didn't give me what I needed to do a good job. So I'm going to keep throwing 1,000 things out there that you didn't do, so you keep doing them, so I'm not accountable. You're not having the same conversation. That's like the key piece of this is like, are we having the same conversation? Can we agree that we're like, this is the problem? And sometimes, Eileen, to your point, it takes you a little bit of time to recognize like how to have the same conversation. Because I've been in the same boat where I have spent 6 months retraining somebody who said they didn't get the training and they're still not doing their job. And eventually, that person to this day, by the way, her name is Erica. That person to this day thanks me for coaching her out. She was not in the right job. She finally trusted me enough to be honest with me about her lack of accountability, and we were able to coach her into a new position that she loves, and she's doing great. So it doesn't have to be conflict, right? We have to agree on the problem. And then like if we can't get there, then we can't move down the line. Right? Like go ahead,
How
sorry.
do you bring up the problem?
Again, it's not blindsiding, right? And this is what I was saying to Pam in the beginning. Like, you can't just go to John in the middle of the conversation and be like, hey, can you stop talking for 2 seconds? Like, right? Can't do that. You want to know why? Because you are over here, right? You're over here in this emotional space. I had a mentor once tell me, if it feels really good to send it, it's a zinger. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't say it. If it feels really good, don't do it. We have to regulate our emotions to actually get to resolution, right? Breathe in the discomfort, communicate out your needs. And that's how we get to agreeing on what the problem really is. And sometimes you don't know what the problem really is until you keep trying. And then you're like, now we have one. Now we have one we can work on. Now I get it. Sometimes it takes a while.
So,
Sorry.
you can go. Sorry, you can go.
Oh, no, I was just saying, so back to the paper towels, can you get somebody to care about your problem or no? I mean, that's kind of like the end, that kind of ends it if they could care less about your paper towels.
you're right. Sometimes you're not going to get people to care, but this is where I say I can coach you in or I can coach you out, right? Like Pam may never care about her towels and she might keep using them until the cows come home. So then I have to make a decision to either, is this a policy issue, right? Is this like a fundamental core values issue? Or is this something that I'm going to have to resolve on my own because it's low risk or low issue, right? Like there's a respect line. And if your office like supports positive, healthy culture, Pam's behavior is not acceptable. But if your office culture doesn't really care, huh?
Sorry, it's been done to me, and I agree with you.
So, but if your office culture doesn't care, and that's kind of like the toxic behaviors that are okay, I might have to actually like go into like that internal family system space and say, how do I protect myself? Because this isn't healthy. And that's the point, right? Like when you cannot have a 3-point conversation, it is not a rational or wise conversation. As adults, we cannot make decisions in that emotional space. We shouldn't anyways. And if you can't get out of that, then that's not a conversation you can have. And you can't really force anybody into doing anything. I think we're all at an age now where we figured that out the hard way, right? But like the 3-point conversation is not for toxicity. It's to try to get out of emotional spaces and get into resolution, right?
May I ask, so once that paper towel issue has been brought up, Trisha realizes this conversation is going nowhere right now. As time goes past and that person or I am in a more approachable demeanor, she might say, hey, Pam, do you remember when I tried to talk to you last week about, did you, and then back to the steamroller. I was steamrolling her.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing that. Do you remember if you let me explain to you what was going on? And I'll say, and then that catches my attention because I don't know what she's talking about because I wasn't listening. Mm-hmm. And I was steamrolling her. Christina, do you think that could be a plausible readdressing?
Yeah, I always talk about parameters for success. So and opportunities for repair. So when we try to have these 3-point conversations, sometimes like we don't have control over the other person's emotions. All we can do is keep inviting them into rational, logical conversation, and they may not. And so that's when you have to set up those parameters for success and opportunities for repair, right? Like that, like when Trisha was trying to talk to you, it escalated really quickly because both of your emotions started dictating the conversation and we were no longer having a 3-point conversation. So those, it hurt Trisha's feelings to be steamrolled. She can come to Pam and say, hey, Pam, last week when I was trying to tell you about something I cared about, I just didn't feel like you cared. And that's a whole new 3-point conversation, but it's giving an opportunity for repair. Now, if Pam, I know you're not, but if Pam's like a total bitch, she'll not, like I've worked with people that don't give a crap about your feelings. And that's like a real eye-opener, right? So then you create parameters for success. Pam's not going to respect you. She's not going to care about you. So how do I create parameters for success? And you have to make those decisions, right? And there's a whole, I'm going to write that one down too. I can talk about parameters for success. It's a great one. The opportunities for repair is important. And I've coached a lot of people in creating opportunities for repair when they were ready to just write people off. And I come from a background where when somebody egregiously offends you or breaks your core values, or my core values are integrity, trust, and sense of belonging. So if like you mess with those, you're dead to me, right? So knowing that about myself, like I'm now the person that will coach people into being like, don't write her off. let's look for some parameters for success and some opportunities to repair. And it works both ways, meaning like if I make a mistake, I have to come to you and offer an opportunity to repair. But I can also come to you and ask for an opportunity for repair.
Just real quickly, Christine. So when I'm ready to talk about the problem with Pam, how do I bring it to her attention again? How do I acknowledge the problem, then transition to evidence?
Yeah, you're asking her to come into a logical conversation, right? That invitation to agree on the problem is super, super important. Andrea, yes, it is being recorded. If you can use the link to get on our mailing list, then I'll make sure it gets to you today or tomorrow. We'll see how behind I get today. But there's the mailing list. I'll make sure to get you the recording. So you're inviting in, and if that person stays in that emotional space, they're not ready to come in. So maybe you ask for a meeting. Maybe you ask for a mediator too. Guys, I've mediated a lot of conflict. Sometimes having that third party just diffuses it in general because the person can no longer be crazy, although I have been in those crazy conversations too with mediators. But that's the idea here, is you're looking for parameters for success, right? Say that again?
What words would I use?
It's an invitation. Hey, Pam, do you have a few minutes to talk today? Is now a good time?
Okay. So
right?
Now she's ready to talk.
So Pam comes in and she's like, yeah, what's up, Trisha? And you're like, hey, so, the other day when I went into the kitchen, I noticed the paper towels were moved. Pause.
That's the evidence.
Well, that's your problem.
Okay.
Right? You don't want your paper towels moved, right?
Okay.
I mean, for you, I guess that's true. It's kind of both. Like, you noticed the paper towels were moved. The evidence might be, I noticed because I always like to keep them by the coffee maker so that if I make a mess, I can clean up, and they were way on top of the fridge.
Okay. But when it's the problem, you want to get them to acknowledge that that's the problem, though?
Yep. Not just acknowledge, agree.
Okay, agree.
Mm-hmm.
So how would I say it to Pam? Like, hey, Pam, I noticed that the paper towels were moved. Did you happen to touch them?
Nope. Yes, evidence. What you're going to say is, I noticed the paper towels were moved. Did you notice that? And she'll say, I didn't notice that.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, they were moved. Oh, okay. Well, I like them in a specific spot, and they were moved. That's the problem. I haven't left the problem. Because that is the problem. I like my paper towels next to the coffee maker. Pam keeps moving them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. It's tricky. You got to just keep practicing. Because what happens is, like you said, Trisha, I could go off and be like, Pam's a jerk. I could go off and be like, Pam doesn't care. There's so many places we could go with it. Or I could start moving straight into evidence, and now Pam feels attacked, right? So the first step is that agreement. Remember, 80% of expectations are disappointments. So if you expect Pam to stop moving those paper towels, you're going to be highly, highly disappointed. But if you can get Pam to agree that moving those paper towels is a problem, 8 times more likely Pam is going to make sure to come up with a solution with you.
So Trisha could say something like, did you notice that they were moved?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I am aware of that because I know I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could speak because you said, let's pause and let them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I moved them. I don't know. I could have moved them. Maybe I put them on top of the fridge. And then Trisha can go into detail about that problem for her.
Mm-hmm.
To educate me.
Right. Or maybe she has a friend that's in a wheelchair and can't reach them. There's reasons why we think these are problems that we need the other person to agree before evidence even matters.
Excellent. Love it.
All right. We're at the hour. Thank you guys for spending lunch with me. I have a few ideas for the next one, but I would love for you to put in the chat, out of all the things we talked about, parameters for success, opportunities for repair, agreements versus expectations, all the things, what would you want to maybe do a lunch and learn on next? Really appreciate you guys being here.